All right, you are now live.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Women and Gender Equity Advisory Committee meeting for September the 19th. It is now 4:32. We're going to get rolling with our land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And now we'll move on to roll call. And for those who just joined us now, just a little reminder that we've got a few people that need to leave between 5:30, I want to say 5 and 5:45. So we're going to have to be done this meeting by 5:45 at the latest, because we'll start losing people between 5:30 and 5:45. So if I cut you off, please don't take it personally. It's just trying to keep us on time. So we'll go through the roll call. I'm here, Councillor Kent. Thank you for being here. I understand that you will not be able to stay for the entire meeting, but we appreciate the time that you can give to us.
Thank you.
Sonia.
Hi.
Hi, Sonia. Cheryl. Copage.
Sorry, I have a new mouse. Just trying to figure out where it was. Okay, yes, here.
Thank you, Cheryl. Liz.
Present.
You. Zoe.
Yeah.
You. Cheryl Murphy.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Cheryl. And Doreen.
Bonjour à tous.
And we have regrets from Councillor Lovelace, Hannah Jackson, and Rihanna. But we do have support staff here with us today. Amy is here with us. Hi, Amy. Bailey Brown is here with us. Bailey. Carla John is here.
Good afternoon.
And Elizabeth McDonald is here with us.
Hello.
Thank you. Okay, so if we can move on to item number 2 in the agenda as circulated, we'd like to get approval of the August 28th minutes. So are there any errors or omissions for the August 28th minutes? I'll take that as there are not. So can we have a motion to approve the August 28th, 2024 minutes as circulated?
I'll move that. It's Cheryl Murphy.
Thank you, Cheryl, and seconded by?
I'll second it, Cheryl Jihu.
So Cheryl and Cheryl, tag team. And so the motion has, are there all in favor? I'm assuming we're all good. There's no errors or omissions. Okay, great. So we're all in favor. So the motion has carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Elizabeth, are there any additions or deletions from the clerk's office?
So the clerk's office did receive one request for addition. It would be added as item 10.1, and it was circulated today. That was the request form received from the chair, and that would be the letter regarding GBA Plus training for mayor and regional council.
Thank you. So we need to have a motion to approve this item 10.1 letter regarding GBA Plus training for mayor and regional councillors.
I can move that, Doreen.
Thank you, Doreen. And may I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Kent. Thank you for that. So the agenda has been approved as amended, Elizabeth?
So you'll call for the question and the motion would be that the agenda be approved as amended.
So motion approved as amended. All in favor? Yes. Am I seeing any? Yes, I'm seeing a lot of north-south. Cheryl, is that a yes or you have a question? That's a yes?
That is a yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So that's all in favor as I understood it. So the motion carries. So item 10.1, letter regarding GBA Plus training for mayor and regional council has been added. Can we move on then to item number 4, business arising out of minutes? I understand that there is no business arising out of minutes. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
That is correct.
Great, thank you. Moving us along to item number 5, call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any committee members that have a conflict of interest? And that includes, well, you can see it in your, do you want me to read this out loud for folks? You may not have it right in front of you. Okay, so conflict of interest, if and when a member or members declare conflict of interest, we need to do something about that Elizabeth is going to regale us with.
So if there is a conflict of interest in a virtual meeting, we'd ask the committee member to turn off the camera and mute themselves while the item is being discussed. And they cannot engage in the discussion for that item that they have declared a conflict of interest for.
Okay, thank you. So there are no declarations of conflict of interest, I take it. I have one which I'll have to step aside as chair when we get to item 10.1. So that is conflict because I put the motion forward for that letter around sex and gender-based analysis plus training. So that will mean, and Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody will have to step in as chair when we get to that item.
That is correct. So it wouldn't be considered a conflict of interest in the sense that this question is being asked. It's just that as the chair, you cannot put a motion on the floor. So when you step down, one of the other members can temporarily act as chair as you put the motion on the floor.
Right.
And then once that motion's on the floor, you can resume your role as chair.
And I would like to do it that way, Elizabeth, if that's okay. I know there were 2 options.
Absolutely. Yep.
So one is for me to step down as chair, so somebody can fill in as chair, and then I can speak to the motion, which I think makes the most sense because I put the motion forward. So if everybody's okay with that, that's what we'll do when we get to 10.1. Okay, moving on to item number 6, consideration of deferred business. There is no deferred business, as I understand it, Elizabeth, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Moving on to 7.1, correspondence. Elizabeth, is there any correspondence that was received by your office?
No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Moving on to 7.2, petitions. Were there any petitions that have been received by the clerk's office?
No petitions have been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And now we're moving on to 7.3 presentations, and I'm really pleased and honored that we have Dr. Ren Thomas with us here today. This is item 7.3.1, overview of affordable housing and HRM. And Ren Thomas is an associate professor in the School of Planning at Dalhousie University and is going to give a presentation on the issue of affordable housing and HRM, which is directly relevant to the remit of this committee. So again, I won't belabor it. I'm just going to turn it over to Dr. Ren Thomas to get started with the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Really nice to be here again. I've been here the second time now. So while I'll present some similar things to what I did the last time with a little bit of a twist, I'll try to share my desktop here so you guys can see. Okay, so what I will try to do then is basically an overview of an overview of what's going on in Halifax right now with affordable housing. Jackie, sorry, can I just confirm how much time, just so I keep track of my time here?
Jackie, you're muted.
Oh.
I think you have 18 slides if memory serves.
Yeah, I think I only have actually 13, but yeah. So if you take out the first, the first and the last, so yeah.
So Ren, if you can keep it to about 15 minutes so we can have time for question and answers, that would be amazing.
No problem.
Thanks
Yeah,
so
so I'll just keep it. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this presentation, but I'm going to a couple of times jump out of it to show you a web page for a couple of them. Okay, so yeah, really happy to be here today in Chibuktuk, as you had the nice land acknowledgement earlier, so I won't repeat. yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on housing and how housing is kind of delivered here in HRM. It's a bit different in other places, but we'll go over that. So I'm going to just minimize this little thing here. I can, sorry. It's like it won't let you do it when you're actually in the in the presentation. Okay, so affordability, the real reason everybody's talking about housing now is that, affordability has sharply decreased in HRM, particularly since 2008. And really it's because of increased migration to a region that really hadn't seen any growth for decades. So we were seeing, of course, increased immigration. And then since COVID, we're also seeing increased migration from other provinces. And since 2019, that's kind of one of the things. Actually, pre-COVID, we got to this point of a very low rental vacancy rate, and we saw a vastly increased number of people experiencing homelessness. Before that date, we had about 250, 270 people experiencing homelessness. At that time, we jumped up to around 800. Now we're up to around 12, as of this month's estimate, around 1,300 people. Just to do an overview, like most housing in Canada is actually built like in the private market for people with incomes that are well above the median. That is basically how the market, like that's how housing is built in Canada. That's 95% of the housing that's built in Canada. So basically, Canadian municipalities are really unable to build or to incentivize even much of the housing that they need. And that's because the responsibility was delegated to them. In the mid-90s, when we were in a severe budget crisis, severe recession. And so municipalities really didn't get any extra funding or the ability to raise funds through taxation at that time. And so we're now in this kind of, as a result of this kind of decades-long, kind of austerity measures, we're basically in the point now that we are in a severe housing shortage. We're estimating around 50,000 units are needed in Nova Scotia by 2030. And we're at the, 3.5 million, I think, across Canada. So we're in this severe shortage. So we do have a national housing strategy, but it hasn't really prioritized long-term affordability, and it likely will not change the percentage of households in core housing need, which is really important for this group because certain groups like single-parent families, like women, obviously students and seniors, they're overrepresented in core housing need. So housing is a shared responsibility. I'm going to flip out of here for a second and just show you this I put the link here, but I just want to show you generally, you can see the breakdown of like what areas of housing each level of government is responsible for. So, the provinces have certain responsibilities like, provincial and territorial building codes. They determine the kind of materials you can use when you're building a structure. They are responsible for planning and development, but they do delegate a lot of that to local governments. For example, at the federal level, we have funding, we have a national building code, we have taxation, all that kind of stuff. Data is collected a lot of times at the federal level. Here at the local level, what we're really talking about is zoning, permitting, kinds of fees that are able to charge to developers. We're looking at bylaws, and we're looking at the delivery of community housing, which is typically delivered by nonprofit organizations. And then some programming, delivery, and implementation by the municipality, like programming around homelessness or around immigration, around settling new immigrants, for example. So there is, housing is this kind of very complex, issue that is, takes all of these different levels of government to deliver. So just to kind of reiterate what I was saying earlier, we are kind of at this point where we've seen a lot of growth in Halifax. Halifax is the second one there, the yellow bar, and that's from 22. The one in the bottom right is from the Halifax Partnership data from 2023. So you can see that trend of, has really, it started actually much earlier than this graph is showing, but this is showing how quickly it increased in recent years. And so there's been a lot of acknowledgement of the need for systemic change. Even the banks, even Scotiabank, even CMHC is showing, there really is a vast need in like certain types of housing, like rental housing. We just haven't built enough rental housing for the number of rental households we have. And if you think about rental households, that's a group that's constantly growing. New immigrants are going to be renters. Students are going to be renters when they move out of their home. People who are splitting up, a relationship is breaking up. Now there's two households. Like there's, it's constantly growing, and we haven't kept up with that. And as a result, we're seeing these very, very high rent increases because there's so much demand for housing. So we do have a federal housing plan that was just released about 6 months ago that focuses on speeding up housing construction. It launches a lot of new federal programs based on provincial successes. So that's something we're seeing now, is where provinces are doing really well. Now the feds are taking those programs and making them national. And the one major thing that we're seeing is making surplus lands available on long-term land leases so that affordable housing organizations can build affordable housing. So I just want to go over a little bit briefly what the province has done. In case you don't know, we did have an Affordable Housing Commission in 2020, which I co-chaired. The whole point was to come up with a series of recommendations within 6 months. There were these kind of 17 recommendations, including these 4 quick start actions. I'm happy to say that all of these went ahead. All of these are being done. So we have demonstration projects that are mixed use and mixed tenure, so rental and ownership. We got new rent supplements added. We added funding to support the federal Rapid Housing Initiative, which, if you don't know, is the only federal program that we have that builds housing very quickly using modular units or doing renovations to existing buildings. We got a community housing growth fund for co-ops and nonprofits. This is critical, again, for women and, because it is typically the nonprofits that typically create housing that is specific to demographic groups, such as women fleeing violence or Indigenous people, etc. So those are pretty critical. Okay, and then this is the recommendations. You can find this very easily. We produce the recommendations, but we also produce 2 annual progress reports, and you can find them really easily. I put the link for that in the presentation, so I won't concentrate. But what basically I want to kind of just tell you really what they've done. So they consolidated the 5 regional housing authorities into a central one. They amended the Municipal Government Act, which allowed them to use specific tools that they weren't allowed to use before. But they, since then, when we got some changes in government, they've actually removed some of those powers. So this is what I was saying earlier about the jurisdiction being really important, because municipalities don't have all the powers that they want to have, and they're constantly fighting with provincial governments for that power. Another thing they've done is twice now they've amended the Residential Tenancies Act. The first kind of major amendment was introducing more protection from eviction due to renovations, and they also extended the rent cap. This year we also saw an extension of the rent cap to 2027, but the unfortunate thing was that they shortened timelines for evictions. So some tenant rights folks are arguing that makes tenants a little more precarious. Right after this was announced, however, we got a federal plan for tenant protection. So that literally just happened last week. So there's probably going to be change in that. Another thing the province has done is trying to support African Nova Scotian communities and Indigenous communities more. So Tawak housing have been supported through housing. There has been a housing needs assessment, which gives these organizations all the information, the data that they need to actually make decisions on the housing that they will need in the future. And they've also supported them on working on the National Urban, Rural, and Northern Indigenous Housing Strategy. The province, because in Nova Scotia, we only have 2 municipalities that are considered census metropolitan areas, which have populations over 100,000. That's us and Cape Breton Regional Municipality. All of the other municipalities are under 100,000, which means they're not included in a lot of the reports that CMHC does. They're not included in a lot of the data that is routinely produced by Statistics Canada. And it meant that places like Yarmouth or Bridgewater actually had no idea of their kind of demographics and what groups were growing and not growing. And so to remedy that, one of the recommendations of the commission was that housing needs assessments should be conducted by the province, and they contracted that out. So every community now has a housing needs assessment. There has been a lot of collaboration on helping communities develop community land trusts. So Truro, Hammonds Plains are 2 of the ones that are kind of noted. There's been this inventory of publicly owned land that has been identified so that sites for affordable housing development can be then basically what they would do would be to either sell or lease that land to nonprofit housing orgs so that they can build affordable housing. And again, I just mentioned earlier, there is now a federal lands initiative, Canada Lands, which was launched just earlier this year, just literally a month ago. They also amended the Halifax Charter to allow faster decisions and free up staff times and improve development agreements. again, there's a lot that the municipalities don't have jurisdiction over, so the province is trying to enable that. And then they've also, like I said, we had this community housing growth fund, which helps all those nonprofits kind of expand. The government has expanded that fund twice, and they've also introduced a new capital fund, which is meant to help nonprofits acquire existing units that are already affordable, and that will help in, again, this larger federal initiative, this new rental protection fund, which was just launched a couple months ago. So they haven't done as well on these other actions, in particular, the online rental housing registry. I mentioned that only because HRM, which I'll mention in the next slide or two, has just done this. They have just announced a rental housing registry this summer. That's going to help us track rents. It's going to help us track like those terrible, huge rent increases, et cetera, so that we, can protect renters more. They haven't done as well on rental protection, and that's been well documented in the media, but HRM, I will mention, has actually done some better work on that. We're starting to. So what has HRM done? They are meeting regularly with the province. So they have this new task force on housing that was launched after the, since 2021. They have this residential rental registry, which came into effect this summer. They've introduced regulations on short-term rentals, so that helps affordability by bringing those back into as long-term rentals, so that there's more rental units available for people. We have been producing huge numbers of new residential units. In fact, we were the top in the country in 2022, and that increased again pretty markedly in 2023, but because of the high interest rates, the completions have actually slowed down a bit. So like we aren't seeing as many units finishing as quickly because of the prices of everything. And we've also received, HRM has also received the first of 4 installments of this $79 million federal funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund, and it's hired new staff to implement increased housing growth in a lot of different ways. Here's actually if you go to halifax.ca/HAF, you'll find out all about what they're planning to do there around increasing density and like allowing different types of units in areas where there would have only been, for example, single family homes allowed and that kind of thing. What are other stakeholders doing? So this is what I wanted to talk about a little bit, because where you see a bigger impact for housing for women is actually with the nonprofits. So if you look at Mi'kmaq Friendship Center, they're building a tiny homes project. The federal and provincial rapid housing initiative funding has funded ADSUM, Mi'kmaq Friendship Center, North End Community Center, AHANS, Souls Harbor, Cody Place, and currently, so those are all done. And then Society of St. Vincent de Paul just opened, or is just now under construction, their project with 38 units. Akuma, as you probably know, is redeveloping their property. So they opened Fairfax Homes, 8 units. And again, a lot of these are targeted. Akuma's is targeted for single women in African Nova Scotian community. So like that's where you're seeing a lot of those specialized units for the demographics that you guys are probably interested in. Then YWCA has a project that's under construction, that just opened, I think, a month ago in Dartmouth. United Way Maritimes just started a community land trust, so they're hoping to acquire some of that affordable stock and maintain its affordability. And then I should mention we now have a nonprofit housing authority or housing association in Nova Scotia. Lots of other provinces have had them for a long time, but it was just started here a year ago, and so that is going to allow a lot more growth in the nonprofit housing sector, which again is where all of these organizations are housed. So there's a lot of really successful strategies and programs in other municipalities, which I don't have a lot of time to go over, but if you want to know more about them, I can certainly talk about them. But there's a lot of really good municipal policies as well as provincial policies. And what we're seeing now, like I think I mentioned earlier, is those things that were happening either at the municipal or the provincial level. The feds are now grabbing those and saying, okay, we're going to nationalize, like the rental protection plan is one of those that came out of BC. BC already did it. They had been doing it since 2018, actually. And now the federal government is taking that on as a national approach. So I would say like the housing situation at HRM is pretty typical of what we see across the country. Sadly, like you could go as small as Chatham, Ontario, or, Happy Valley Goose Bay, or there's pretty much no place in this country now that does not have encampments, that hasn't seen this really really kind of desperate times for folks. Our provincial government has taken action. We might not be seen as strong as some provinces, but we are definitely making a lot more action than other provinces. And I would say the same thing about AHRM. We're large enough to have taken action where possible, but we're not as large as a Vancouver or a, let's say, Calgary, where we're able to take on a lot more action. Yeah, just for kind of in terms of our capacity. So what we're going to see is like the solutions in the future are, going to have, include all the whole range of different governments. Some of the leaders actually right now are Indigenous nations, and some of the Indigenous nations have their own development companies. Like there is one called MST in Vancouver that is made up of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. They have quite a lot of land that they are redeveloping, and they are prioritizing, obviously, affordable, safe housing for their communities. So lots of really great work done by Indigenous communities, like amazing work. But what we're basically seeing now is I think an acknowledgement at the larger, federal level that this private sector led model, which we've had for decades, where like 95% of our housing is built for profit, it has to transition. We can't keep doing it because we're seeing the kind of negative results, externalities of that approach now. And typically we are seeing these groups like women, single parents, low-income people, other key demographics like our seniors and students who are really suffering from that approach. And so there's acknowledgement that this needs to change. It's part of the reason why it's so hard to keep on top of. Like I taught housing policy this winter, and I can't even tell you, I could not even keep up with the announcements at the provincial and the federal level of how much is actually happening right now. It's a very good time for housing, but it took an absolute crisis for us to get this level of action. So I'm just gonna, here's a picture of me and Jackie from when we did our research together. But there's a lot more on my website if you did want to take a look at some of these other articles that we worked on, an amazing study on LGBTQ seniors and their housing needs. But there's lots of other stuff on there too. So anyway, I'm happy to answer questions. I probably went a minute over there, but hopefully that got to some of your main concerns. And if there's any other concerns, I can answer some questions.
Thanks so much, Ren. That was a fabulous, concise, and really to the point presentation. I'm really grateful that you were able to join us today, and you've touched on a lot of really important issues that intersect with this committee. So I'm going to bring us over to our speakers list. And so we've got Councillor Becky Kent is up first. So we'll turn the floor over to you for your questions.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I do want to acknowledge, though, Ren, this is a terrific report. In fact, we try very hard as counselors to be able to convey a lot of information on many, many subjects, but this is top of mind for so many. I just wanted your permission, if I can, to share it with other counselors, because it's really a really good step-by-step kind of way through it. The public I find sometimes we get into very deep conversations which have to be had, but this is a very easy way to sort of get a good glimpse at it. In the picture at the top, with the small pallet shelters, I had the opportunity to tour those over on Atlantic Street and the what will be the future District 3, and I was impressed by them. And although impressed shouldn't be what we wish we didn't have to be at this point in our society, when we look and we have had the experience of tenting and people in woods and in cars and so many layers of unhoused, these are impressive, and they are safe. They're outfitted. And they will get the people out of the elements. The ones on Atlantic Street are for 50 and over, which I think is a great step in the right direction around making. There's so many complexities to why people are unhoused, and cohorts that maybe have a better shot and better potential for success and supported by Quest, these ones on Atlantic Street. The whole situation was comforting to me, although it's easy for me to be comforted when I'm sitting in my home and privileged to be where I am. But I just wanted to share that with folks because you could drive by and have a look and see what those look like for directly. And the picture there on the top left, where is that?
You mean at the first slide, the very title
Very
slide?
top, yeah, the very.
I believe that's let me just look again and make sure I got the right one. I believe that's the St. Is that the St. Vincent de Paul? No, that's the sorry. It's the Dartmouth one that I mentioned. I have to go back to the slide to tell you.
The reason I ask is they look very similar to the ones that are in what is now considered to be the Southdale development of Clayton development that they had intended to. They received money from the province to create affordable housing, and then it became too costly and they pulled away. So that still continues to be a challenge with cost of building. And I just wanted to note that that's very real challenges, because we would have looked forward to those being a better rate than now they will be. And I think the money was given back to the province, but that's not helping the people that we want to help. So yeah, just making that point today. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Councillor Kent. And Ren, just to clarify, so you're okay with Councillor Kent and other members of the committee sharing your slide deck? That's what I'm hearing?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So we'll move along on our speaking list to Sonia. So Sonia, any questions that you might have for Ren, please go ahead.
I think it's a clarifying question first to Councillor Kent. Were you referencing the project at Windsor?
No, I was referencing ones that are in Dartmouth at the Southdale wetlands. It's quite controversial for quite a while in the media because of the wetlands, but it's on the Dartmouth side.
It's okay. Thank you. I just heard it and I was wondering if it was the one at Windsor, because it did reflect on our, when I say our, I mean the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism, our accountability report. We did talk about one of the projects that didn't follow through for a housing project by Municipal Affairs and Housing. And they did give reason why that one couldn't follow through, because the cost to build it was going to defeat the affordability of that project. But anyways, Dr. Ren, thank you so much for your presentation. A lot of the items that you highlighted were very familiar to me while compiling our accountability report for our office. We did take note of some of the things that have been done, especially towards the underrepresented and underserved communities. Other projects like the opening of Kiknu, the first of its kind for the Mi'kmaq seniors, and of course the Millbrook First Nation Residence Center. So it's great to see all these things that are happening, and I think it continues to be important. While it doesn't seem enough, but it continues to be important for these things to be not only documented but talked about, and in the detail and context to which you provided us information today. So thank you for doing this good work.
Yeah, you're welcome. And yeah, that's the thing. There is a lot of, I think when you in the media, the reason I do like to include obviously these community groups and the nonprofits is like that. Like I said, I mean, for your particular committee, it makes sense that this would be, a concern of like where is this specific housing for these specific groups, but also that is where we tend to see a lot of the innovative things happening. Like we do see like funding from all the different levels of government, like cobbling together all these different things to try to make these projects work. And like I mentioned, the First Nations in particular, like on reserve, because they actually have been able to do really cool, innovative things because they're not municipalities. So they don't have all of the zoning, they don't have all of this stuff. So, and they're small communities, so community consultation is a lot, it's one community, it's one community. So it like there's just some really innovative things happening, like like there's a nation called Siksika. I think I put it in, yeah, it's on the slide here. Siksika Nation in Alberta, they're doing like 3D printed houses. Like no one else is doing that,
Oh.
you know, like, and the reason they're able to do it is because they're a First Nation. They were able to get federal funding to do a pilot project. Like it's just, they're able to do things that municipalities aren't. So that's why they're kind of at the edge, the cutting edge. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. So we'll move along to Cheryl Kopacz-Gill for your question, please.
Hi, Ren. This was actually very exciting, and I'm very curious on any more research that you have on some really innovative things that Indigenous communities are doing, because we actually have 3 First Nation community lands within HRM, and I know all of them are thinking and trying to figure out what they can do to support housing for Indigenous people in the city. I know we have the work that the Friendship Center is doing, but I think you are correct. There are opportunities for us, and we do have land in the urban area that it's something that we are definitely looking at it and exploring. So if
Yeah.
you wouldn't mind sharing anything that you have, I'd greatly appreciate it. And I would share it with my other First Nation counterparts that we work with.
Yeah, if you'd like, I actually have a whole presentation on kind of innovative practices that I use in my housing course, and a lot of those examples are from First Nation. So I can certainly send that along as well if people
That
would
would
like to see that.
be amazing. If you could
Yeah.
send that to Elizabeth, she can get it over to me.
Yeah. Yeah, there a lot of in modular, for example, there's a First Nation in Manitoba that's they've actually developed their own panelized housing
Yep.
panel, and they're now, like, I do consulting work up in Nunavut. Nunavut's actually hiring them to do a six house little pilot project up in Nunavut, because obviously panelized in Nunavut makes a lot of sense, and they're just thrilled that they can support like a small First Nation. Like, yeah, so there's just a lot of
amazing. So I'm very excited because we struggle with housing, and we are now facing some encampments and some of spaces that we haven't had before. So I think any tools and stuff and research that's already been collaborated and taken together, it's an opportunity for us to look. And I really appreciate the work you've done. Thank you, Ren.
Yeah, thank you.
So Ren, you're okay sharing that presentation or that content material from your course with members of this committee?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Ren. Over to you now, Liz, for your question.
Thanks again for a great presentation, Dr. Thomas. As you said, it's the second time you presented to me. I don't know, you could be going to this committee every day, but I just don't see you. And it's very clear that you explain complex concepts to people for a living. It's great. I don't have any questions. I just have a couple things that I want to say out loud, because I'm the tire kicker on this committee. I want to recognize that we're all sitting here in a municipal committee, and we're all talking about how important third sector investment is. And I don't want to downplay the role of third sector. I think it's super important. But although you've given us amazing information that is awesome for us to have, and that I hope we're going to take and do something with, I think it's important for members of this committee to consider whether we should be asking the tough question of whether we've handed things off to the third sector too soon. Where housing is concerned, it very often is a game of hot potato between the municipality and the province, where the municipality says, well, that's the provincial responsibility, and then the province says, oh, well, the municipalities could be doing more with their zoning and this and that. I understand that HRM is limited by its inability to accrue debt in terms of its capital investments, but I do wonder, and I would love to have your thoughts on this, so maybe it is a question after all. Are there other opportunities for the municipality to seek collaborative partnerships, other sources of funding that wouldn't require debt financing, anything that would allow them to move into the space that so many other municipalities are offering in owning and operating subsidized affordable housing? What do you think?
No, not in Canada. Municipalities the ones that do have arm's length development corporations or nonprofits that are doing that work. So they are separate financially and have different boards from the municipality. So like City Home in Hamilton is like that, or like in Calgary, it's actually called a housing trust. So Calgary Housing Companies is a land trust model. None of them are operated as municipal housing per se. They are all operated as nonprofit housing or corporate through a separate corporation. So that's what would need to be done. And Way Mason has been on record many times on saying that that is something that Halifax could and probably should be doing. But that's how it's in Canada is typically done.
Yeah, sure. I'm not suggesting a municipal department of housing that deals with the day-to-day operations of subsidized housing, but there are a lot of cities that are quite involved with funding, and to a certain extent administering subsidized housing. I lived in Ottawa for 7 years, and the city of Ottawa is very involved in subsidized and affordable housing, increasingly so. What do you think is the barrier to the city of Halifax beyond that capital investment piece? That debt financing hurdle, what do you think is the barrier to Halifax doing something like that and sort of taking back our own power and taking action in our own city?
I mean, there's really no reason why they couldn't set up, like I said, it's got to be a separate organization because that's how it's done. And like, that's pretty much how it's done. Like like I say, in places like Victoria, Ottawa is one that has, it's a separate corporation. It's not the city. So that's very clear. Like the city, like the legal departments do not want to get involved in property management, and like that's just not what they do. And I would say the same thing is with our transit associate, typically in Canada, our transit organizations are either municipal or provincially, like provincial orgs, and they're the same way. They don't want to buy property, they don't want to manage property, and by refusing to do that, they're actually losing out on a huge amount of like they could be doing a lot, but they refuse to do it. I mean, it's done in other countries, but we don't really do that in Canada. I mean, what's to prevent them from starting a development corporation, like, or a nonprofit or a community land trust that is an arm's length thing in the municipality? It's a political will, obviously there is the need to get that initial financing and then to decide like how you're going to maintain, that growth of that, like the maintenance of buildings where, let me put it this way, like, there's a reason why co-ops are the second generation from public housing. So public housing came about, it was impossible to keep it in good shape because we built it during a boom time and then it continued during a bust time. And during bust times, there is no way that governments have the money to support the maintenance of buildings. The reason why co-ops were considered the second gen is that they're mixed income. They are mixed income. They are locally based. They are local nonprofits. They are not administered by the province. They're not administered by the city. And that was seen as a solution to all of the problems that came with public housing. And so I don't see, even though we do have municipal development corps, I don't see most cities really getting into this in the way of like providing public housing, and even our provincial governments, with the maybe exception of Nunavut and Northwest Territories, doing a lot of that in the future.
Thanks for that. Councillor Kent, you had your hand up and then it disappeared. Are you good?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of respond a little bit to Liz's question in that, and I guess a response around Ren's point. I can tell you that this municipality has approached the province around taking back housing. It used to be within the municipality. I don't think it's as simple as there's no political will or not a want. Clearly, there's been an effort to address things that have been the mandate of the province that the municipality has taken on. One of the challenges that we face, I think Ren mentioned it, which is not just the maintenance, but it's the support services and all of the layers of care that would be required. And that's not a municipal service that it's more of a social service. And again, that's provincial right now. I think that for us to be able to do it, it would require legislative change to the charter. I could be wrong, but I don't know that I am right, but we have asked the province to consider it and they have not responded.
Thank you,
For
Councillor.
that context, Becky, that's really helpful.
For
One
the
thing I
second
kind of wonder
time-
about is when you're just
But just hang on a second. Just can we have Elizabeth respond? Sorry, Elizabeth, you've had your hand up for a bit, and there's probably a technical issue that you need to intervene on. And you're muted. That's a technical issue.
Not so much a technical issue, but I just wanted to note that it actually does look like even if we are losing Cheryl Gehu and Sonia at 5:30, 5:45, it looks like we actually still will have quorum past that time. If more questions want to be asked, just wanted to note that, Chair.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. Ren, I don't know, did you want to respond to that, or can we go back to the speaking list?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, there is a lot of complexity in the provincial kind of regulations around what municipalities can do and can't do. We have the charter. I will just point out, City Home Hamilton has existed for decades, and Ontario has legislation for housing. So obviously, they still have a development corp, even though technically Ontario has responsibility for housing. So
The city also does fund social services through an arm's length corporation because the library has a social worker.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to Zoe to ask the next question, please.
Hi, hi, Ren. So first, I'd like to thank you for a very informative presentation. Such a great breakdown of what different levels of government and organizations have accomplished, which is very encouraging to see. I moved here in 2009, and like many of you here, I witnessed population increase firsthand. When I was renting, there were options for people to choose from, but now it sort of feels like you get what you take what you can get. And even with the current, many development projects going on, many of them are for profit, which with a lot higher price where a lot of people can't afford. And I get that affordable housing is such a complex issue, as so many factors and stakeholders, and income, interprovincial migration, as well as immigration and inflation, and the sellers and buyers and the market and the landlord. And while actions needs to be taken, it seems to me that the solution is quite nuanced. So I'm just wondering, what do you think is, the biggest challenge that municipal government can take on to move to tackle this issue?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thanks for that. You're right. It is a very complex issue. And like to quote Darrell Dexter, former Premier Darrell Dexter, he always says, we don't need a silver bullet, we need silver buckshot. It's like we need to throw everything, just throw everything. And that is part of the issue. Is there is a lot. There's a lot the municipalities can do. There's a lot that municipalities can only do with the partnership of their province. Right. So like, just to take something simple like secondary suites, Edmonton decided they wanted to do that. It was during the it was like not too long ago, actually about 15 years ago, they decided they wanted to build like 900 new secondary suites. So they because they knew that would be a gentle density and kind of increase it in neighborhoods and allow, so they introduced the bylaw, but they needed the province to say like, okay, here's some funding. Like here's $75,000 that a homeowner can access if they want to create a secondary suite, and they are willing to do it and keep it within these affordability thresholds, right? So yeah, a city can make a bylaw, but it's always like, show me the money, right? So you can make a bylaw, but whether it's incentivized is a whole other thing. And in order to incentivize, you often need the province or the feds to kind of step in and kind of help out, because municipalities don't have that money. Right. So now what we're starting to see, I think, is a little bit more alignment, at least for some of the more forward thinking cities, in what they wanted to do all along. And again, it's easy to be quite critical of HRM, but like the center plan already had all of that. It actually, the Housing Accelerator Fund, when we got it this year or last year, I guess it was, there was hardly any changes that we had to make. I mean, there were still changes that we had to make to our center plan, but a lot of the changes that HAF was that the feds were requiring in other cities, Halifax already had done. It's already in the plans. So all of that increased zoning along places like Roby and Yonge Street, where there can easily be more density and there's good transit service. Like, so what we're seeing now is like finally some alignment between these different levels of government. Other provinces have seen that earlier, like Quebec has seen that earlier, BC, Alberta, where they've gotten this nice alignment between the municipal programs, and some funding to back those up. Saskatchewan, like they built, I don't even know how many. They had 3-year action plans for I think 12 years straight, and they they beat their targets every 3 years. So every time they set a target of like, we want to build like 12,000 new units, they built more than they said they were going to build. So, and Edmonton did it, like lots of other cities have done it, right? So I think Halifax is kind of in the middle of what it could be doing, but it can learn a lot from these other mid-sized cities out there. That's what I would say. So there is a lot that can be done. But I think it's a question of like recognizing the scale of the city that we have and the kind of growth that we're seeing. So we need to look at other mid-sized cities that are like what they were doing, really. Like it's not really great to look at Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver because they're in a different ballpark altogether. I mean, I don't know, I would guess that there's 500 planners working at Vancouver. I know personally most of the 200-ish or so planners that work at Halifax, like most of them are our former students, or you know what I mean? So it's a much smaller kind of just that resource alone. And that means it's gonna be longer for development applications to go through. It's gonna, you know, so one of the things I would say they could learn is, you know, speeding up that development approvals process. Like Edmonton and Calgary have both done that. Like they've actually automated parts of their development approval process. So if a project comes through and it meets it ticks all the boxes, it just goes through a lot quicker now.
Great, thank you for that, Rand. I'm going to move us along to our next speaker. So Cheryl Murphy, over to you for your question.
I don't think I really have a question. I want to thank you, Dr. Thomas, for so much good information. There is some information there that gives me hope.
I'm glad. That's good.
When we talk about affordable, I guess the difference between public housing and affordable housing is there's a wide gap there right now. I know that HRM has done a lot of work in terms of trying to densify the central area. And I also know that they've been working to, you know, streamline their development process. So my last comment about this is that we didn't just walk into this. It happened, but it happened because we allowed the gap between for-profit housing and affordable housing to become so large, right?
Thanks.
So
Thank
it's
you,
going to
Cheryl.
take time. I guess that's my. I mean, you don't find funding, you don't develop funding unless it's a shame that we had to come to a crisis. But it's also a matter of changing an attitude about homelessness. It's a matter of working together, just like it appears to be happening, right? In order to undo years of what can be considered a blind eye to affordable housing or income-based housing. Right.
Thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate that. I'm going to turn the floor over to Doreen, who's next on our speaking list.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Ren, for your presentation. I really appreciated how you were able to bring, we talked about this complex issue, but how you were able to really, in a very succinct way, be able to bring us through who's responsible for what. Truly appreciated that. And I also had a giggle when you talked about Daryl Dexter's comment. I'm in public education, and I worked with a deputy minister in British Columbia who was also former military. So excuse the military phrase I'm about to use, but he never used ready, aim, fire. It was always ready, fire, aim for that very same thing. You know, something's got to stick, but the only way really that we're going to know that anything sticks is you've got to get all kinds of different kinds of solutions. And I think that's something else that you showed us, that there's so many different aspects and partners and communities and groups that are working on this. My question is really, I'm trying to bring myself back to the mandate of our committee around women and gender equity. And I'm wondering if you could speak to the point, because we seem to be Halifax seems to be in the middle of, and Nova Scotia in the middle of everything. Like there are some that are better than us. There are some that have some catching up to do. So when it comes to addressing specific needs for members of those communities, do you have any advice for us as a committee, or even how are we doing in Halifax when it comes to addressing some specific issues for these specific communities that we're representing?
I would say the folks, so I should mention too that if you do want to echo what Cheryl said, if you want to be inspired, to go to, maybe send one of your representatives of your committee, if you're able to one of these conferences like the CHRA, which is Canadian Housing Renewal Association, and that's where all the nonprofits go and meet every year. Or the Cooperative Housing Federation also has an annual one. And that's where you're seeing these stories where groups are building these projects, and they're actually, they're the ones that are on the ground who are actually, like housing their clients with specific needs and supportive housing and that. So I would say the people who would know the answer to that question are actually like YWCA, like Mia, like who I just chatted with yesterday, or people at ADSUM, or people at Tawak, or like the people that actually have these housing units. I think Tawak has like 150 or something units like that they manage. AHANS now has, I think they have 200 units now. So those are the folks that actually would have a better picture of how people are actually doing. Like Akuma just housed like 8 families this year. Right. So they'd have like a better sense. And I wanted to show you.
Maybe I meant to be. Yeah, I guess maybe I meant to be a little bit, I should have been more specific.
Yeah.
From a municipal government's perspective.
Yeah.
Do we have a role
Yeah.
in advising our municipal governments around how we can better address and support members of those communities that we're representing? Or is it something that really is third party?
Yeah.
Like, is it something that doesn't exist necessarily in municipal politics? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it doesn't exist, because one of the things that, like, I think that you will be getting someone come and talk to you from planning, right? Like from the planning department on gender-based analysis, or they already did talk to you? Is that correct? I can't remember if they already did or they will be.
That is next month. We are the committee slated to receive a presentation from them.
Yeah. So what they will be talking about, I think, is how they are able to engage members of, like these different demographics, like how when they're planning like new things, like they're planning new parks, they're planning new transit, how do they actually make sure that, women, girls are included in these conversations? How do they make sure people who are to us LGBTQ are included? How are they making sure those needs are incorporated into the services that they're planning? That's where I would say it is integrated. But if we're talking about especially if we're talking about something like services, like that the city offers, like, schools, libraries, parks, those kinds of things. Where it comes to housing, it is a little bit more tricky. I would say, like, where your role could be is to advocate for supporting these projects, right? Like that are going forward, which the city puts in. Like, I didn't show you this. I don't think I did show you this link, but it's in the presentation, where those projects like ADSUM and all of those, they were actually funded through the Rapid Housing Initiative, but they're funded through the city stream. So the city of Halifax, so HRM actually nominated, right? Like they actually awarded it to these specific organizations to build this housing, right? So that is like, there's RHI also has like the organization can also apply for that funding, like as a nonprofit, but there's these city streams, and we were in the first round because our vacancy rate was so low. So in 2020, we were one of the first cities was awarded, and that's where we got all those projects. So that's where your role, I think, as a committee could be like, we want to advocate for, us to go. Now, I don't know how many more rounds of the Rapid Housing Initiative they'll have, and that's the only one that really gets at that deep level of affordability, which is what those nonprofit service providers, especially those who have supportive housing, are really trying to build.
So I just realized we are at 5:31, so we're going to have to wrap up this section of today's presentation with with Dr. Ren Thomas, so we can get on to other business. And I'm also cognizant of the fact that we're going to be losing a few members of council, of the committee. Councillor Kent is leaving. And I believe, Elizabeth, will we have quorum to move on to other business?
So we will lose quorum if we have 3 members leave. Certainly the added item or some of the items may have to be deferred to the October meeting
Okay.
or future meeting of the committee.
Okay.
Who are leaving, Elizabeth?
I can stay on a little bit longer till 6, but 6 is my hard stop.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, just before we move on to the rest of our agenda, again, I wanted to express my sincere thanks to Ren for being here. And I had a hard question for you, but I'll ask you later. Ren has heard all of my questions already. Again, thank you so much for being such a wonderful resource to this committee and for all the work that you do. And we look forward to hearing from you again, potentially at a later date. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take
Thank
care,
you so
Ren.
much for having me. And yeah.
Bye. Bye-bye. Cheryl, did you have a question for the rest of the agenda? Are you good for now? Okay, so let's move on then. We're going to move on to item number 8. So information items brought forward, there are none. Report discussions, item number 9.1. We have an update on proposed amendments, administrative order. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Bailey and Carla to provide an update. Thank you.
Okay, I will stop. Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Chair, I just wanted to point out Liz did make a suggestion in the chat that your item could be considered prior to the update. If you wish to move it while we have quorum.
Carla and
but completely up to the discretion of the committee. It looks like though we will have quorum until 6 if Cheryl is able to stay on. So
okay, so with apologies to Carla and to Bailey, is it possible to move to item number 10.1, which is a letter regarding GBA Plus training for mayor and regional council? I'm going to ask somebody to serve as chair in my stead because I'm the person who put this forward. And this, as you know, is an item that we've talked about previously on this committee. And so this was an opportunity for us to action that conversation. So is there someone who would be willing to step up and serve as chair for this item? Carol Murphy, you are hired. Thank you. Okay, so essentially everybody has received this in your package. So this is a request for the Women and Gender Equity Committee's consideration. It's a request from the floor that we actually put a letter regarding GBA Plus training forward for the mayor and regional council to consider. So the motion is in the package that you've seen, and it is as such that the chair of the Women and Gender Equity Advisory Committee write a letter on behalf of our committee to encourage newly elected mayor and regional council to participate in the federal government's GBA Plus or Gender-Based Analysis Plus training provided by HRM. And the rationale for that is to inform and encourage the newly elected mayor and members of regional council to participate in the federal government's Gender-Based Analysis GBA Plus training provided by HRM. Encouraging participation will ensure the mayor and members of regional council can apply the gendered lens to their work. So the outcome that I'm looking for is a letter written by the chair, to be distributed to as general correspondence to the newly elected mayor and regional council. So that's where it's at.
So Jackie, are you moving that?
I am.
Okay, so we need a seconder.
I'll second that.
So do we have discussion? Does anybody wish to make a comment on it?
Amy, you have your, oh, sorry. All right.
Okay, we'll begin with Doreen.
Oh, I think Amy's hand was up before mine.
Okay, Amy?
Can you folks hear me okay?
Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick note, and this is up for the committee's decision on this, but I wonder, just in reading the motion, and this is maybe more relevant for the actual writing of the letter, whatever the decision is on that. We may want to kind of specify and be clear. There's the federal GBA plus training, and then there's the training, and Carl and Bailey are more positioned to talk about this, but there's the specific GBA plus training that the DNI office offers to HRM staff. So I think we're potentially mixing messages by saying the federal training offered by the municipality. What I understand you're in the past bringing up this, Jackie, it was the federal training. So just to kind of put that out there for the committee's consideration, I think.
Okay. So just to clarify that what you're saying, Amy, is that it should refer only to the federal training, or it should refer only to HRM training? Which?
I think more of just to clarify, to clarify it, because I think
Okay.
currently it reads as a mix of both. So to
Okay.
clarify it in the motion, yeah.
All right. So can you, Jackie, can you do that? Can you clarify that for us?
Yes, I can. So I thank you for that, Amy. So we can change it to the DNI office GBA plus training. So that would be the amendment to the motion as it currently is circulated. So I'm not going to read do you need me to read the whole motion again?
No.
I will just say, sorry, folks, I'm probably complicating things here, but maybe Bailey and Carla will have to speak to this. But I know we've kind of had conversations a few times now about the training that's available. And I think the issue still stands that there would need to be more. Yeah, maybe I think what I just wanted to speak to is that just at the base level, the text it doesn't clearly express which one we're referring to, but I think just a note that for us to be able to provide training to counselors is something that Carla and Bailey would have to speak to, whether or not it's actually possible to provide the training that we provide to staff to counselors. So that's another thing just for your consideration. All right, I'll stop talking now.
So Elizabeth, did you have something?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say Jackie and I worked together to put this motion together, and I took the wording, the wording for the federal government GBA plus training was taken from those two motions. That's the wording that was used in the two motions that were passed by Regional Council in July of 2021. So I think the reason the confusion is there is at HRM was added to that motion because it was my understanding that the federal government training is offered to regional counselors through HRM. If it's completely separate than that, then the just at HRM can likely be amended or taken from the motion. I don't know if that's, it was just my understanding from reading the staff report and looking at the motions that the federal GBA plus training would be offered to regional counselors through HRM, or it would be an option for them to take that training. But if it's not necessarily through HRM, then I think just the at HRM could be struck out, and then the motion could just be amended.
Bailey, I think you probably want to clarify, do you?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. So the July 2021 motion happened before HRM had municipal GBA plus. It hadn't been launched yet at that point. So the federal gender-based analysis plus is self-led and virtual. We don't do it. We just provide it. We let people know that it exists. We talk about it every time there's a significant date, several times a year. And then there is the GBA plus for municipal employees. Now that is very much like based on municipal employees who are working within the municipality and not sort of at that higher level of going through the approval of policies, etc. So it may be less applicable and a less ideal use of council's time because it is more based on the more frontline doing the work level of GBA plus things. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
So you're suggesting that the federal training would be more applicable? Okay.
The motion was meant to speak to just the federal training. It was just my understanding that it was offered through HRM, but if it's just a completely self-led thing and that anyone can, I guess, sign up for and take on, I guess, decide to take it themselves, then I would say just take the at HRM out of the motion. It was the motion, from my understanding and speaking with the chair, was speaking to the federal training.
Oh, okay. Now we'll go to Doreen.
Mine's a different point. So I just want to make sure that this last point that we were discussing has been completed before I bring us into another discussion. So are we clear on the amended or not motion?
So I don't think we need a true amendment, but just a change in the
Okay.
motion to drop that in HRM or at HRM or the HRM reference.
Right. So I'm not sure if this is an appropriate moment to add this thought, but I'm going to say it anyway, because one of the things that we've been struggling with is we've requested, or these requests have already gone to council before, but we just don't know if there's been follow-up on it. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to do a did you do it or not, but is there a way that we could either weave into the report or do a follow or this request or do a follow-up that gives us an idea of how many, a year down the road, what's the percentage of council members that have actually followed through on taking that training or not? So not sure how that would be worded or how we can do the follow-up, or if it's something that we just need to put on our list of things to do if and when this gets passed. It's just an element I think we need to weave in somewhere at some point.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you certainly could add that to the motion, but
I'll leave it to those way smarter than me where that should actually land, whether it's in the motion or a follow-up from the committee. I think it's just something we need to do.
Bailey, did you have another clarification? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Carla and I are actually working on a memo regarding the 2021 motions, but in finding information, we did confirm that staff cannot compel or make mandatory training for anyone. So we can ask that they do it, but they don't need to do it because of our position.
Absolutely. But I think I'm still wondering if it's appropriate for us just to know what the percentage is. Or those that have, so that we have an idea, as opposed to, I understand we can't tell people what to do, but it would be nice to know.
There may be an issue with privacy because it is such a small amount of counselors. If it were like a massive organization of like 100 people or so, you can't really pick out who has done what, where it's 17 people. It's a bit more difficult.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you, Bailey.
So Sonia, I know you have a deadline, so I'm going to let her go, Liz.
Why? I love to hear Liz every time, but it's okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Honestly, my point was, or why I raised my hand was around what Doreen just said, because if it's a voluntary, because you can just go and click and start the training right now. So how do we then measure who has done it against who hasn't? And so that's just why I raised my hand to say, if it's not anything when I saw the motion provided by HRM, I thought maybe there is now another one that's been provided by HRM. And so, which I felt, okay, that can be measured. Like you can check to see without any personal information, you can say, 50% or 80% have completed the training, but where it's online, like my daughter could just click and go. So I was actually just going to raise it to our chair to say, can we settle for not knowing how many? Would it be sufficient for us to just write the letter and make, at least make that impact to say we did make this recommendation or we did ask for this because we think it's important, and then leave the counselors and all of them to take it seriously and to actually follow through. It's just my thought. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So Liz?
Yes, thank you. I do think we should bear in mind that we're not talking about implementing a monitoring and evaluation program. We're talking about Jackie writing a letter to whoever comes onto council to say, hey guys, just don't forget about sex and gender-based analysis, please. That's really important. We're just talking about a letter just to establish sort of to incoming people who may or may not have served as councillors before, and certainly the mayor will not have been a mayor before. Just to say, hey, this is a good thing for you to think about as you discharge your duties. Having, I hope, now made Jackie's life easier, I'm going to immediately reinvest that credit and make it harder by saying, I wonder if there would be some openness to actually removing the specificity of saying federal government or municipal government or whoever's gender-based analysis training, and just say training in gender-based analysis, because I continue to feel that endorsing this one specific product, which is not designed for politicians, it is designed for researchers, grant recipients, and policymakers. And if you've taken the training, which I have, it's really clear that it's designed for working level people to operationalize working level policies. I think it doesn't make sense to recommend this particular one when there are so many different modalities out there, many of which are available for free, many of which provide, in my opinion, much better grounding in the plus piece of GBA plus than the federal government. I wonder if there would be some openness to just saying, we'd love for the chair to write a letter on the committee's behalf to encourage the newly elected mayor and regional council to undertake training in sex and gender-based analysis. And then I'm sure Jackie will do a lovely job of explaining why that's so important in the letter itself.
Jackie, are you, oh, Sonia, you're still here.
That might be a
Sonia?
legacy hand.
Yeah, maybe. Jackie, are you, would you be comfortable with that?
So I will accept Liz's challenge, and I will counter it with a revised wording. So if you look at the motion as it was circulated, what I'm suggesting, based on what I've heard, is that we have that the chair of the Women and Gender Advisory Committee write a letter on the committee's behalf to encourage the newly elected mayor and regional council to participate in gender-based analysis training. Okay.
Only sad that I can't be the seconder since that position was already taken. I love the revision so much.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm now proposing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So that is good. So do we have any more questions? And I have a comment before, Jackie, do you want to take back the chair now?
I think this has to be passed before we can swap a room.
Okay. Oh, Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Sorry for forgetting to unmute myself this meeting for some reason. I can put the amended motion in the chat, since there was two portions that were taken out. And Liz, you're the seconder for the amendment.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
I thought that was already taken, but if I can second, sign me up.
Okay, so great. And it's there in the chat. You can, if you can look at your chat. I just want to note that mayor and council always has an orientation. So if this letter is directed to that orientation, perhaps it would have more impact. And I'm not, that's just where the letter should go as opposed to anything in the letter. So does everybody see that the chair,
Yeah,
the Women and Gender, that write a letter on the committee's behalf, right? So we all see that. So that's the amendment. We have a mover, which is Jackie, and a seconder, which is Liz. And can we call for the question on that then? So anybody, all in favor?
So are we voting on the amendment or the motion? Or both?
The
The amended motion, I guess. Are we, Elizabeth?
We would need to vote on the amendment and then on the main motion.
Right. So do we
Okay.
accept the amendment and then?
The main motion.
Then on the main motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
As amended.
So this is the amendment?
Correct.
So, yeah.
Okay. So that the amendment is before us. So we have a mover, Jackie, a seconder, Liz, and now I'll call for the question. So all in favor? And I don't see anybody not in favor, so we'll call that motion, that amendment approved. So now we'll call for the motion on the amended motion. So all in favor? And anyone against? And that motion is approved. Jackie, back over to you.
see how much fun being chair is, Cheryl?
Oh, lovely.
Thank you for doing that, Cheryl. Okay, so we are now back to, with apologies to Bailey and Carla. Thank you for your patience. So we're moving to 9.1.1, update regarding the proposed amendments to the Administrative Order 2019-004 GOV respecting the women and the Women's Advisory Committee change to terms of reference. Thanks for your patience, Carla.
Hi. So we can officially use the name. We're just waiting for legal to complete the document and send it unredacted with like the official wording without highlights. So the person who's responsible for that is in a conference this week. So he said he will get it to us. Well, it was today or tomorrow. So it wasn't today, so it'll hopefully be tomorrow. But since council has already passed it, the indication is that we are good to start using the name right away, and we already have anyway. So that's the update.
That's amazing, Carla. Thank you very much for that news, that update. It's very welcome news. Any questions for Carla before we move on? So big thumbs up, Carla. Thank you so much for that. That's fantastic news. Very grateful for your stick handling that through the various approval processes. So thank you again for that. So we are moving along to date of our next meeting. Wow, how did that happen? So we're on item number 11, unless my math is really off this evening, but our next meeting is October the 17th. Yeah, let's put that in your calendar. It should be in there already. And then we'd like to adjourn, item number 12. So motion to adjourn. I need a mover only. And Cheryl, you are quick off the mark. So we are adjourned. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. And we look forward to reconvening on October the 17th. And meantime, Elizabeth and I will work on the revised letter. So thanks again, everybody, for your time. Great to see you all. Have a great evening. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Elizabeth, are we okay?